The biggest mistake that new sound volunteers make when they first start out is that they set the mix, they set the faders, they do the sound check, and then they forget about it during the whole worship set. Why is that a problem? It's a problem because during the worship set, there are so many different dynamics in a song, in an intro, in a chorus, that as the sound engineer, it is your job to make the band sound the best that they can possibly sound. The biggest mistake that you can do is to set and forget the mix from the get-go. So today I want to give you a few tips, and then I know this will help you. I'll break it down in a very simple way so that the next time you show up, you know exactly what to do and that you don't just set and forget the mix as soon as the service starts. So let's start out by saying this. The first thing we have to acknowledge is that when you set the mix right before the worship leader goes up and grabs the mic and says, "Welcome everybody," that set that you have, that mix that you have is your starting point, and that's it. It's your starting point because if you notice, in your worship set list, you usually have fast songs, praise songs, slower songs, softer songs, worship songs. Sometimes you have different worship leaders. Sometimes you have songs where it's the acoustic guitar that shines. Sometimes it's a song where the drums shine, or the keys shine, or maybe the tracks. Maybe you're playing with multi-tracks, and maybe there's a song where the multi-tracks really carry the band, and others where it's just a pad with the band. So it's in these different dynamics of the song where you play a key role. So the mix that you have at the very beginning of service is just your starting point. It's gonna look different by the time you get to the last song. And it may not be drastically different, but it's gonna be different. So keep this in mind, that your starting mix, your starting scene or file that you pull up on your digital console is very likely just gonna be just your starting point. And that brings up a good discussion, because some of you might still be using an analog board, and there is nothing wrong with using an analog console, an analog board. If you use an analog board, then what you need to do at the very beginning of service is bring all the faders up to a starting point. When you do your sound check, make sure that the vocals are heard, make sure that the instruments are connected, everything's ready to go. And more so than ever, you need to set that starting point for that very first song. And that happens in sound check. Maybe your worship band does a run through of the songs right before everybody comes in. If that's you, then that's your opportunity to set the starting point of your mix for the very first song. If you are working on a digital console, this is going to be so much easier for you, because you have the ability to save things from last Sunday. So if you really like the way your mix sounded the Sunday before, remember, at the end of that service, make sure to save that scene. If you have any digital console, it's gonna be a very similar workflow, but there's a button on your console. If you have an M32, if you have any Midas board, if you have a Yamaha, any digital console is gonna have a save function. So you can save that scene, and next time you recall that scene, all the faders, all the EQ, all the compression, all the settings that you saved will come up exactly as you saved it. It's kind of like a computer, pretty much. You're pulling up a file. And so if you have a digital console, this becomes so much easier, because now what you could do, I'm saying you don't have to do it this way, but what you could do is you could save a scene for every single song that you have on your set list. Now that's getting in a little more advanced, so you don't have to do that, but you could do that if you really like the way that song sounded and that mix, the way it sounded during rehearsal, and you tweaked it and you moved it around, and and you loved the way it started out. You can save a scene per song if you wanted to. The way I usually do it at my church, or the way my team usually does it at our church, is we have one main scene that we use and we recall every single Sunday. And that file, that scene that we recall on our digital console, is one that we use as a starting point at the very beginning. And that usually has all the last things that I saved from last Sunday or last rehearsal, so that on Sunday morning, when I show up and I pull up that scene, it's exactly as I left it when I turned the system off on that rehearsal, the previous rehearsal. So it's a starting point. If I were to give the example of this last rehearsal that our band had, which was last night in our case.
The advantage of coming to rehearsal is that you can set things and get things ready exactly as you want them on Sunday, so that you relieve that pressure from Sunday of rushing and trying to find, where everything is, what the song is, the dynamics of the song, the order of the song. So coming to rehearsal is super important, and paying attention to what they're doing, paying attention to the dynamics of the song. Is there a drum solo? Is there a guitar solo? Are there even drum solos anymore? Any guitar solos anymore? When is one singer leading? When is another singer leading? All those dynamics in a song are great to pay attention to at rehearsal, so that on Sunday you come already with the plan. You already know what's going to happen next before it even happens. Most of the time, right? Then there are times where things just completely change because they are subject to change by the power of the Holy Spirit. So, see, I noticed in this song, at this intro, there's no acoustic guitar. It's just tracks, drums, and bass. So I'm paying attention to that. I say all this to say, as much as I would like to say that all this is just set and forget, it really isn't. You set it, you don't forget it, but you're confident that the settings that you have are your starting point. And then during rehearsal, it's a great time to be able to just tweak and to dial it in right, so that on Sunday you can relieve that pressure of trying to get everything going. That's what I do during rehearsals. Matter of fact, the singer, the worship leader, had to go down deep and low for the first verse of that song. So I recall from last night, I had to bring her fader on her channel up a lot more in the verses than in the chorus, because of the way the key of the song was. She had to ride that range in her voice. So I had to make sure that in the verses, for her to be audible, for us to be able to understand the words coming out of her mouth, that volume had to go up. If I had not adjusted the volume after the beginning of the song, we would have missed the entire verse because we couldn't hear her at all. So my responsibility, if I'm on the console, if I'm mixing that Sunday, my job is to make sure that whoever needs to be up front in the mix, is what we call it, whatever needs to be shining or the spotlight at any given moment of the song, I want to make sure that I can hear that person well. Almost always, it's going to be your vocals. Your vocals and your mix are going to be what make people want to sing along, make the congregation want to worship along with the music. So that's always, in my mix, is always up front. So I have to be able to ride those dynamics whenever the singer, I can tell that she or he is going really low. And because the note is low, they tend to sing a little softer. And I need to help them a little bit by just pushing that volume fader just a little bit more so that they can hear them. And I remember that was the verse. The chorus, she came in full blast, full voice, singing from the diaphragm, singing from her full voice. And I had to bring her volume down. And then the other vocalists, the other worship leaders were singing background, were singing harmonies. So I had to be able to find that sweet spot where I could hear the lead singer, but also appreciate those harmonies that we had. And then the band would come in. There was a part where the electric guitar really came in strong, and I want to make sure that I heard that in the mix. So this whole time, my hands are on the console, and I'm just listening. I'm listening to these parts. I'm trying to make note of which parts are highlighting certain instruments or certain vocalists, and I make a mental note so that on Sunday, which is in my case in 2 days, this weekend, I can come in and I remember this verse for the worship leader is tough. So I'm gonna bring her volume up a little bit more. So my lesson was, my mix is not a set and forget kind of thing. You set it, but you use it as a starting point so that throughout the worship set, you can appreciate these things. And here's what I've noticed happens. At least, I don't know if it happens in your church, but it happens in my church. Sometimes my pastor comes, he doesn't do this often now,
But sometimes my pastor comes to the back and says, hey, I can't hear so and so. Or hey, I can't appreciate so and so. And usually when that happens, it's because one of two things. One, I'm not paying attention during the mix, during the set, and I forget that there's a key part that an instrument plays and I haven't brought them up in the mix and it's out of balance. Or there's a difference in preference or taste in the way the song sounds. So it is my job to be able to pay attention to these cues so that what I'm delivering is an excellent mix. Now, this brings up a whole nother conversation. If this happens in your church, where this happens a lot, where leaders or pastors come up to you during the worship set and say, hey, I can't hear this person or I can't hear that person. This might be a great opportunity for you to have a courageous conversation, because it can be a tough conversation to have. But to talk about, what are the expectations? What do we want? What's the sound that we want as a church, as a band, as a worship team? What is the sound that we're looking for? And let's dial in that sound during rehearsals, right? That's what they're for. If you have a rehearsal and you're having that you're kind of bumping heads with leaders or pastors that are criticizing your mix, but in a way where it's like last minute, I can't hear this, I can't hear that. This is a great opportunity for you to invite them to rehearsal and say, hey, let's listen to this together and let me get a clear vision of what you would like to hear, right? If that's the case. And if that's not the case in your church, where there's nobody can express exactly what that vision or what that sound is, maybe this is a great exercise that you can have with your worship team and say, hey, what is the sound that we're going for? And maybe during rehearsals, you can have one of the worship leaders or one of the musicians come back with you and stand with you in the booth and say, hey, this part right here of this song would be great if this person's instrument is highlighted or this voice is highlighted. And together you create that sound, or you dial in that sound that you really want out of your worship band, out of your team. But it all comes down to the same thing. The mix that you have is not a set and forget deal. It is a starting point so that throughout the worship set, you make adjustments that serve the song well, so that you can have an excellent sounding experience for people that are worshiping along. A great tip that I use all the time is this. I close my eyes and I just listen to the mix. I'm a very visual person, right? And I can be deceived whenever I see a fader that is really low or one that is really high. Visually, it doesn't always match. My faders don't always match exactly what I'm hearing in the room. So a great tip that I use all the time is I just close my eyes. I close my eyes and I just listen, because that means that I'm exercising critical listening or critical hearing, and I can make decisions based on what I'm hearing in the room. So if I'm closing my eyes and I hear the drums, the toms are way too loud, now I can open my eyes back up and just bring that down in the mix. Or I'm closing my eyes and I can't appreciate what the acoustic guitar is doing. I can't appreciate that strumming or that acoustic feel that the song needs. Open my eyes back up and bring it up a little bit. So basically, I'm closing my eyes to make decisions with my ears as opposed to with my eyes. This is a very easy tip, but it helps me all the time because, again, many times I want to use all my senses. And at the end of the day, the only sense that we have when it comes to audio is our ears. So close your eyes and listen with your ears. Sounds very simple, but it really helps. Another thing that I do all the time is that I use an iPad with my digital console. Now, if you don't have an iPad, well, first of all, if you have a digital console and you don't use an iPad or a tablet that you've connected to your digital console so that you can control the console on that iPad, then this is a great opportunity for you to do that. I'm gonna create a video. If you want me to create that video, actually, comment below with the console that you have, and I'll show you step by step how to easily do that. Because here's the advantage of having an iPad or a tablet with you during rehearsal or during a Sunday. If I have, for example, if I have my iPad and I have it connected to the digital console, I can walk around the room to where people are actually sitting or standing during the worship set or during the preaching, during the sermon, and I can listen to what it sounds like from their vantage point. And this is a huge advantage because it happens, not all of our auditoriums or not all of our sanctuaries are treated properly. And there are spots in the room where, because of the way the speakers are set or the placement of the speakers, of the acoustic treatment of the room, there are some spots that sound really great, but there are some spots that sound really dead, or some spots that I can't appreciate certain things in the room. So what I can do is, if I have an iPad, I can walk around the room and I can make decisions so that there's a balance at wherever I'm at in the room, that I'm getting the best mix possible. Now, this is very subjective to your location and my location, and my room and your room, because my room, for example, has no carpet. The walls are just drywall, and when we rehearse, there are no chairs. Like, we're on our campus at our church. We set up our chairs, we set up our instruments, we set up the stage every single Sunday, and we take it down. Even though it's our building, the space that we're in is a multi-use space. So when I am walking around with my iPad during rehearsal on a Thursday, when we rehearse, there's nothing in the room. So I have to make decisions in the mix. So I walk around, I listen to the mix, I listen to the band, and I'm making decisions based on different positions in the room. But on Sunday, during sound check, when the chairs are already out, when the lights are on, when we pull out a small rug for the worship band, for the worship leaders to stand on, there's already more bodies in the room. There's more elements in the room. I still walk around and I still make adjustments, small adjustments, because the room is going to sound different now that there's more things and more people and more bodies. During the worship set, I don't usually walk around, but if I have an iPad, I have the capability to walk around and to make any adjustments that I may need. But it all comes back to the same idea, the same principle. The mix on your console is not a set and forget deal. It is dynamic, it's moving, and it all depends on what's happening on stage, what's happening in the worship moment, what's happening when the pastors come up, or when the leader comes up and takes the mic and we transition from worship to announcements, or worship to prayer, or whatever it is that happens in the schedule of your worship service. So it's important to know this, because at the end of the day, your job, my job on the sound team is to deliver an excellent service. And it comes through us. It comes through our mix. So at the end of the day, we're like the gatekeepers of just how good the service sounds. And that can be a huge responsibility, a huge weight. But I hope that these tips kind of break it down in a very simple way, because it is a science, but it is an art as well. And for the way you mix and the way I mix is going to be very different. But the common denominator here is that it is not a set and forget deal. And the moment that you become engaged with the worship service, the moment that you are listening critically, the moment that you're paying attention to what's happening in the room, in that worship moment, your decisions can highlight and serve that moment in a very incredible way. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. I'm here to help you. I'm here to serve. And I just want to say thank you for being part of the sound team. If nobody's told you this week, what you're doing is so important. What you're doing for the kingdom of God is crucial. And just because you're behind the scenes doesn't mean that God doesn't see what you're doing. Please show up on Sunday ready to go, ready to serve with the right heart, because it makes a huge difference with how we worship God together. So God bless you. Have a good one.
It's a wrap. See ya.